Don't miss Western Canada's largest business-to-business platform connecting the holistic building industry. Gain access to over 250 industry leaders showcasing new technologies and innovations at Buildex Vancouver. Connect with agriculture, engineering, construction, home builder renovators, and property management professionals. Learn from 150 plus industry experts through over 80 seminars and panel discussions on what's happening across Western Canada's built environment. Select seminars, keynotes, and workshops are accredited for continuing education credits. Buildex Vancouver takes place on Wednesday, February 15th and Thursday, February 16th at the Vancouver Convention Centre. Tickets are available at buildexvancouver.com. Hello and welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce editor Lindsey Cole.
And Lindsey's here because we're doing an editorial check-in for the beginning of 2023, and it's been a bit of a doozy in several ways. So maybe you could start with there's a lot of health and safety stuff on the go with us.
Yeah, we thought it would be relevant to kind of do a check-in from the editor's desk, if you will, for 2023, like you allude to, Warren. But, normally you kick off the year with a bunch of news items anyway, because it is busy. But it just so happens that this particular month, in terms of, has started off with quite the bang, I guess we'll say, in terms of our news coverage. Our team has really hit the ground running, and there's been a lot of things and developments to cover that come our way. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this month actually on our feature schedule happens to be our Occupational Health and Safety Month feature. So we have a number of articles that are going to be coming out this month relating to that topic. But what's, I don't know if it's fate or what you want to call it, but there happen to be a lot of relatable stories on that spectrum that we're seeing come to fruition in January. I know you and I were talking the other day, and it was a Friday, I think it was, and was just on the Daily Commercial News side of things, our reporters were just,
Humbled.
Yeah, they really were trying to cover various things. We had a partial floor collapse at a high-rise under construction in London, Ontario. Thankfully, no substantial injuries were reported, so that's always a plus. And fire crews were able to rescue them, but that's a pretty breaking news story to develop in the first weeks of January. Then we had several actually water main breaks happen in Mississauga that literally flooded out streets. So, there was images and videos of cars almost underwater, and it was a pretty big mess there. So thankfully that's all cleaned up now. But once again, that may speak to the broader issue of, the aging infrastructure and what's happening across many municipalities in Ontario. Not necessarily occupational health and safety on that front, but in some ways it is, because you obviously don't want these aging water mains to just burst, and never know what hazards that pose to workers. We've had a number of charges that have been handed down in the East and in the West. Evan reported quite quickly on a development that in relation to a tailings pond incident that happened in 2021. I think you and I might recall it happening. Basically, Suncor and Christina River Construction are facing 28 charges, actually, in relation to this incident. It's really, really tragic death of a gentleman who was operating a bulldozer when he broke through the ice of a frozen tailings pond at a Suncor plant near Fort McMurray. So obviously an extremely tragic incident, and now those companies have some charges before them. Obviously none of it has been convicted in court, and there's still that whole process to go through, but the charges have been laid. So interesting that we are in 2023 and the charges are now just getting laid, but that often happens with these incidents. They tend to take a little bit of while for the investigations to take place. So we'll be following that one carefully to see where it lands in terms of convictions, fines, etc. We also had on the eastern side of things, it's not necessarily a construction related incident. It's a little bit on the periphery of it, but it's pretty substantial in terms of the history that it made. Again, unfortunately, there was an explosion that occurred at an Ottawa propane company, and 6 people were killed in that incident. So it's one of the worst disasters, workplace incidents that has occurred in recent memory. So a number of charges have been laid against the owner and the company itself, in terms of occupational health and safety charges. So we'll follow that one as well. But that was and it was almost a year to the day actually that the charges were laid. So it did happen in 2022. So that one's actually fairly quick on the spectrum of charges being laid. But the company itself was called Eastway Tank Pump and Meter Limited. So we have that story and all these stories on our website. So I should mention that. So obviously I'm kind of doing a high level overview, but we'll also throw some links in our podcast post on this podcast, so you can check out the stories in more detail. But so that's been an interesting development. We had Angela following that story. Then taking it back out west again, just yesterday, one of our freelancers filed a story about another incident involving heavy equipment. This one in Edmonton. It was Finning International Incorporated has been charged with several occupational health and safety act charges after a yard incident occurred. And at this one, basically there was the death of one employee and the injury of a second. So again, very tragic. All of these are very tragic incidents, but what I think is important to note is that charges are being handed down and they are starting to go through the process. So just kind of reiterates for us some things to note and follow. And you never know with these investigations what will come down the line in terms of further health and safety improvements, right? So it's always something we want to touch base with the industry experts normally when these things conclude in the courts. So it's been, go ahead, Warren.
Oh, I was just going to say that we had a spate of these sort of things. It wasn't last year, it was the year before, I think. I could be mixing up my years here, but there was another burst of a whole bunch of bad stuff happening all at once. And this one seems worse, although that might be recency speaking. That's the most recent stuff I've seen, so it's the stuff I think is more intense. But it seems to me that this is another wave of similar to what we had last time.
I'd say that, these are more developments of the tragedies that have happened. So in December 2020, which we also have a story on today that you can check out. But December 2020 out here in Ontario was an absolutely horrendous month when it came to workplace fatalities. I believe there was 7 alone in the span of like a week. It was terrible. So we're following pretty much all of those cases as much as we can in the courts. But we actually had a development in relation to an incident in Windsor. That was one of those December 2020 deaths, where an individual he actually pleaded guilty and was fined $25,000 in relation to an incident where some demolition was occurring at a job site and a wall collapsed. So a person was killed. So you're not wrong in saying that we've had a number of things come out this week and a number of developments of these things. You're certainly not wrong in highlighting the fact that there's been a influx of this type of coverage, because it doesn't normally come out just in droves like this. So we have seen a lot of developments when it comes to investigations. But in terms of actual incidents themselves, thankfully, the ones that we have covered, there was another fire at the Lambton Power Generating Station, where some demolition is occurring, and that didn't result in any injuries. So yes, there have been some incidents, I would say, this month, but thankfully they haven't been as tragic And then, conversely to that, we've had some, not conversely, but in relation to that, we've had some updates on some investigations. So the news is certainly humming along with these types of developments, but thankfully and hopefully we never have a December 2020 again.
And I guess moving away from all the occupational health and safety stuff, is there anything else on the go that you think needs your editor's eye looking at it?
Well, doesn't it all? No, just kidding.
Yes.
No, I would say we have a few things of interest that are on the go. Angela was just recently attending the opening of the Michael Garron Hospital. So she attended that site visit recently. And, there was a lot of dignitaries there, as you might expect, Doug Ford, John Tory, etc. There, because it's a fairly monumental opening of this building.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff happened while it was under construction as well. We had to go through the pandemic, which was a big thing, hospital construction alone. But, I believe there was some outbreaks that occurred. Rapid testing, I think, was introduced at this site as well. So there's been some interesting developments along the way for this project. And, kudos to the contractors and sub-trades and all those involved to be able to kind of work through that and be able to open the facility in a fairly timely manner. So that's pretty interesting. We have some other stories on the go in relation to some bigger projects. There's a development on the Massey Tunnel project. So stay tuned for that, because that'll be coming out as well. I'm not going to give that away because it's an interesting development. I think one of the items we'll be watching closely throughout the year, because I think it's going to be evolving, is the Greenbelt discussion. I know you're familiar with this too. And frankly, also the initiatives to build more homes. We have a lot of stakeholders that have really shown a lot of diligence on trying to come up with methods to improve the amount of homes built in Ontario. But of course, there is certain contentious elements when it comes to some decisions Ontario and the Ford government are making. So I think we have to be keep an eye on that kind of coverage, because we have a green belt here in Ontario that's protected and very much cherished by a lot of groups. So just this week we had a group stating that Ontario has broken the law by quote unquote forcing Hamilton, the city of Hamilton, to expand its boundary into the Greenbelt to build homes. So it's kind of like pipelines out west and the discussions around that, or LNG out west, is now you could draw a parallel on those discussions somewhat to the discussions about the Greenbelt here in Ontario. So there's kind of some natural commonalities there that are, interesting to follow. So it's something that we'll be looking at. But I do think from an industry perspective, there is a need to build more homes. We have a shortage of homes and people wanting to buy homes. So it's definitely a balance that needs to be had, and one thing that we'll be watching for as the year and issue progresses. Kind of going along with that, though, that I would be, if I didn't mention this, I thought it was very interesting. Dawn is working on a story right now about immigration. So in order to build all these homes and other projects, we obviously have a skilled labor shortage, which is no secret. We've covered it in our year in review. We've covered it extensively. And there's been the industries really, and the Ontario government, for what it's worth, has really tried to come up with various ideas. And, one of the things is upping the immigration numbers and getting more people, into the trades and making it a bit of an easier process. So Dawn's working on a story that's a little bit different on the immigration side of things, on a report that was published by the Institute for Work and Health that he'll go into more detail about. But it's kind of interesting because it showcases what needs to be done to really help immigrants coming to Canada and be embraced within the trades and be embraced on site. And the differences that, they may have gone through on their sites that are completely different here. Because you got to, there's very big differences depending on where they come from. So it's kind of a story based on the challenges that they face when it comes to training, be it language barriers or other just completely different health and safety practices. Um, so while I think it's extremely important that we do tap into that immigration pool and get um, some skilled immigrants on sites and into the trades, which is extremely important. It's also equally important that we're prepared to do so and make them feel as included as possible. So, an interesting story to stay tuned for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and where should people go, although we both know the answer to this, if they want to see all these stories and more?
Well, they should definitely go to dailycommercialnews.com and journalofcommerce.com to see all of our coverage. And we also have our weekly newsletters as well.
Okay, and this very podcast. Okay, so thanks for joining us today, Lindsey.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you.